Hi.
Acción. Wait.
And action.
What is really important for you as a parent to give your child is the knowledge that nothing about the dissolution of the marriage is their fault. That it doesn't mean that they are less valuable, that they are less loved, and that they are less important than they were before. Hi guys, welcome back to Single Mom Files episode 2. Today I wanted to discuss with you a little bit about helping your children adjust to the news of divorce. This can be an incredibly traumatic time for a child. And I feel like I've said this a lot, I have said this a lot, but children see themselves as extension of their parents' marriage. I would say probably until maybe around the age of 15, 16, when they're starting to come into some of their own identity. So having one half of them leave the home can be fairly traumatizing. Now, there are relationships between men and women where they sit down together, they're very respectful with one another, and they explain to the kids that for one reason or another, the marriage isn't working out. But more often than not, unfortunately, what we find is the parents will be arguing a lot, they'll be distant, they'll be in a bad mood in the home. A lot of children are exposed to excessive fighting. One or both parents may or may not be verbally belittling the other parent. And if you're a parent and you're speaking ill of your spouse, you have to remember, in the home where your children live, that person that you're married to, that you may not have feelings for anymore, that you may have fallen out of love with, that you may be having massive amounts of resentment or disagreement with, that person is still your child's father or mother. I'll just speak from my perspective. If I were to speak ill of my ex to my children, if I were to verbally belittle him, if I were to make fun of him, every word would be like a knife in my children's heart. So we really have to guard our words. We really have to take care of what we say. And if you have a little girl and you're speaking ill of your child's mother, this woman is who oftentimes the little girl wants to grow up and be like. She doesn't see her through the same eyes as you see her. She sees what is good and lovely and beautiful and life-giving about her. She sees that this is the woman who makes her meals, or this is the woman who gives her hugs or reads her story at night. And the same with little boys. If you are speaking ill of this little boy's father, whatever kind of husband the man is, he's still that little boy's father. And daddy might be fun, he might be adventurous. He doesn't want to hear that you think his dad's a loser or that his dad can't seem to keep a job. He sees his daddy, because children look at the person as a whole, and just because two parents can't seem to make it work doesn't mean the children don't look at both of you with big eyes full of love and wonder. All that being said, avoid speaking ill of your child's parent. It doesn't serve you, it doesn't serve your children. It's confusing enough without both parents hurting one another verbally. And all of the things that you have to say to one another should be said behind closed doors. And if you can't speak to each other without screaming and name calling, to be quite honest with you, you shouldn't be speaking, because nothing is going to be resolved through conflict. There are some exceptions, situations where someone is being physically abused. There are situations where a parent is potentially abusing drugs. And in those situations, the amount of confusion is heightened. The children don't understand the change in their parents. First of all, let me say, if you are being physically abused, there are women's shelters and places all over looking to take women and children in and to help get them safe and on their feet. There is never a reason to stay in a situation where you are being physically abused, where your children are being physically abused. You are more valuable than that. Your children are your treasure. Get your children and yourself to safety. Okay, verbal abuse, same thing, okay? If in the case of a mental disorder, in the case where you have tried everything that you can to make peace with a person who literally won't stop verbally abusing you and is doing it in front of your children, get out of that situation. Those words your child will never forget. I hear people say things like, oh, kids are resilient. You know what? Adults are still thinking about the things that their parents said to each other when they become adults. They are thinking about the good things their parents said to each other. If their dad was good to their mother, they're remembering the way their father treated and spoke kindly to their mother. They're remembering the way their dad would hold their mother's hand. And all of these things are building up memories that as adults we later base our life decisions off of. So for instance, if you have a mother who stayed with a man who cheated on her their entire marriage, you're going to remember that. And you're probably not going to trust men. You are probably going to have an insanely difficult time being married, because even if you're with a good man, everything that's playing in the background of your mind is telling you that men are untrustworthy and they have to be watched. That's not healthy. Remember that what we do affects our children. You know, if you are at a place where you don't love yourself enough to leave an abusive situation, look at those babies. If you have a little girl, look at your little girl and imagine her being the woman standing in your shoes. What would you do if a man was speaking and acting that way towards your child? Or if you had a little boy and you're a man, I recognize that some men are also in abusive situations. Imagine your son in your shoes. It just doesn't work. The most valuable thing that you can teach your child is how to love and respect themselves. You love yourself and you respect yourself first, and then you pour into others, okay? Because that is a reciprocal, loving and giving lifestyle, right? It's just like a bank. If I have $1 million in the bank and all I ever do is withdraw, I'm constantly taking my money out of the bank, eventually I'm going to run out of money. I will literally be bone dry. I will have no resources to draw from. Love is the same way. If we aren't filling ourselves up with love, eventually the well runs dry. And we were not created to use people to make ourselves feel good, right? So that shouldn't be coming from your children. The love that you give your children should be from the well inside of you that you are first loving yourself. You're spending time in prayer. You're spending time reading the Bible, if that's what you do. You're spending time listening to things that are giving life back to you. You're taking walks by yourself. You're getting your head right. And then when you turn around and you love your child, it's from a place of authenticity. It's not taking something from them that they're too young to give you anyway. But that kind of love still reciprocates, right? I'm giving my daughter my best version of myself. I am loving her with no strings attached. I'm not trying to get anything from her. She's a child. I'm just speaking life into her. But the life that I give her will in turn feed me without me trying to make her feed me. Having children is not about making yourself feel better. When you choose to bring a child into a home, onto the earth, it's because you want to extend whatever life you have inside of you. Stay away from toxic anything. If you're a woman and you are divorced or you're going through a divorce, do not bring your dates to the house to meet the kids. The situation is already confusing enough. The only men your children need to be around are the men in their family that are trustworthy. We don't need to have strange men vying for kids' attention, making the situation more confusing. You know, there is a time for that, but it is certainly not in the midst of a divorce, and it is certainly not right after a divorce. There is a natural order of time that should come before you're introducing men to your kids. They need to figure out who they are in this new dynamic and whether or not they're safe, and whether or not their mother and their father are going to make sure that their needs are taken care of. Like I said, they're innocent and they need to remain innocent. We don't put our selfish desires, when I talk about loving ourselves first, I'm not talking about doing whatever we want because we're adults. We don't put our selfish desires above our children. There's a time and a place for dating, and it's not in the midst of a divorce when a child is trying to adjust to what's going on. I know I already said this in a video with Dominic, but I didn't date. I didn't bring men into my home. The only men who came into my home prior to Dominic were members of my family, or they were husbands of my friends. So my kids weren't meeting boyfriends. I wasn't having men sleep over with us. I just think that's incredibly unhealthy, and it tells your child on some level that you don't know who you are and that you're untrustworthy, and that you and your desires are more important than theirs. So don't be bringing men or women, if you're a guy, into the home until you know that it is a safe, committed relationship. The next thing that you can do to help your children adjust is something else that I did already touch on, but keep your home a place of peace. You know, they're going to go through all kinds of wild emotions. Sometimes it helps to hire a counselor for your child to talk to outside of their parents. I had a great relationship with my children, but still the best thing that I could have done for them in our situation was to allow them to speak to someone that they felt safe and that was in their corner, that had their best interests at heart, outside of the broken family dynamic. All of my girls who experienced that are better because of it. So there are a lot of resources available. If you can't afford a counselor, I would look into that. I would contact maybe your local church organization. Just find someone to ask your school counselor what there is out there available for you so that you can get your child the help they need if they need it. Another thing to consider, which I did already talk about, is keeping your home environment a place of peace. Don't allow your kids to call each other names. Don't allow them to take their emotions out on one another or you. Keep it peaceful. Nobody's perfect, no situation is perfect, but I would always tell my girls, don't talk to my daughter that way. And that sounds harsh, but I wanted them to understand that that sister that they're speaking ill of is also my daughter, and she is just as valuable to me as she is as an individual. So we're not playing favorites. Kids will react differently. I had one kid that was very vocal and very angry and very loud, and you have to find what works. I would actually set the timer on a microwave and tell her that for 2 minutes she could scream and say whatever she wanted to say. But when that 2 minutes was up, we were going to sit down and we were going to calmly work through it. And I actually only had to do that a handful of times, maybe 4 times, before she understood that that fit throwing wasn't serving her. I had another daughter who was completely introverted. She didn't want to talk about anything. She just wanted to stay in her world where it was safe and nothing hurt her, which is also unhealthy. So with her, I was constantly trying to draw her out. What you have to say matters. You're valuable. Your feelings matter to me. Just because your sister's loud doesn't mean that you get overlooked. So you treat the children as individuals, and you keep your home environment peaceful by not allowing them to take their hurt out on one another, on you, and then you don't take your hurt out on them either. So if you guys have any more specific questions with regards to your children and how to help them adjust the dissolution of a marriage, I would be happy to answer your questions. Leave your questions in the comments below. This is just a short overview. There are a million different scenarios, personality types, but the main thing is to keep your children focused on peace and focused on the future.